Hi, welcome to Bruce's Garage. I'm Bruce, and this is my garage. I just got done installing a ceramic coating on this Mazda, and I've been doing a lot of coatings lately and talking with some suppliers as well. And they've given me some tips that I want to share with you that are really more like rules that we need to follow, and we can't ignore them if we want to get the best results from the ceramic coating that we're installing. So come on in and let's have some fun. Well, thanks for joining me today in the garage to learn about some tips that we cannot ignore if we want the best results from our ceramic coating. So we're going to jump right in to rule number one. Use the panel prep from the same manufacturer as the coating. I know that's a controversial one. I see lots of debates from people, and it really continues to absolutely baffle me. Yet, the more suppliers I talk to, the more firm I get about you have to use the same panel prep. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to notice a difference when you're installing the coating. In fact, you probably won't notice a difference. In fact, you probably you don't even have to prep. And you won't notice a difference when you install. But where you will notice a difference is in the durability and longevity of that coating. And it amazes me that people don't want to just use the same panel prep. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to use a different brand, or I have some leftover from another company. Yet you spend hours and hours preparing to install the coating. You want and expect the coating to last for its reported durability of 5 years, 3 years, 8 years, whatever it is, and then go online and complain when the coating fails after a year and the coating stinks. But you didn't follow and use the same panel prep. It baffles me. So why does that even matter? Like, what is the science behind it, or why does it matter? Well, there's 3 different types of panel preps. And you can see I've got a bunch up here from different vendors. But essentially there's 3 types. So you have the isopropyl alcohol type, which is, I think, what most people think all panel preps are. And that's probably the fallacy. But the second type is a solvent-based panel prep. And the third type is a proprietary blend of panel prep. And so that one is probably the most critical. And the best example I can give you of that is Diamond Body. And so Diamond ProTech has their own specific panel prep, Diamond Body Prep, and it has got nano diamonds in the prep. And so if you want the best results from Diamond ProTech's coatings, you use their panel prep. It's designed to work with their coatings. Other vendors, it's the same kind of thing. Their panel prep is designed to work with their coating. And you may say, Bruce, it's isopropyl alcohol solution. What do you mean it's designed? Well, what I mean is that there aren't things that are incompatible or that are going to affect the coating's performance. In other words, they test them together to ensure they work. And so when you use someone else's panel prep, they have not been tested with that specific coating. There can be coloration differences that could affect performance of the coating. There could be fragrances that could affect the performance of the coating. There could be other chemicals. So anything that's added to the coating, even though it's still an isopropyl-based prep, doesn't mean that it won't affect the performance of the coating. I'm telling you, it amazes me the number of people I see online that are complaining that their coating didn't last. Yet I bet many of them didn't use the same brand of panel prep. So if you want success, use the same brand of panel prep. That's rule number 1 to follow. All right, rule number 2. This one's a little bit easier for people to follow, but still can trip people up. Allow the proper flash time before you level the coating. Sounds, again, common sense, right? Well, if you level the coating too early, then you're not allowing that coating to cross-link, to bond with the clear coat on the vehicle or whatever surface you're applying it to, be it trim, be it glass, whatever surface. That time is essential to get the proper connection between the surface that you're applying it to and the coating itself. And the reason that I think sometimes it's not followed is not all coatings flash in the same way. When I first installed coatings, I was looking for that rainbow effect, that oil slick on water, and many coatings do that. But some don't ever produce an oil slick on water appearance. Some do not rainbow. Some just haze over. Some might bead on the surface. So those are different kinds of indicators for different coatings. So it's important for you to understand how the coating will flash and what is the typical time that you need to be looking for flash. So the coating I put on this vehicle last night was Naziol ZR53. And I was prepared for a short flash time. About 30 seconds was about typical. However, the humidity in the garage was a little bit higher than what their recommended humidity level was, which was 50%, and it was closer to 70% in the garage last night. And so flash time was fairly quick. And in fact, when I was putting on the coating on the back of the vehicle, I needed to open up the garage door. It was about 85 degrees outside. And guess what? It was almost an immediate flash. So you have to pay attention, you have to understand your conditions, and you have to understand what it will look like when that coating flashes. This isn't hard, but it just means, well, I've installed 30 coatings, I've installed 500 coatings, so I know how they work. Well, maybe if you install all the same brand, you do know. But if you're working with different brands or trying different things, or it's your first time or second time, just pay a little bit of attention to the recommended time for flashing, understand your current weather conditions, and also understand the characteristics of that coating and how it will appear before you level it. That's going to help you ensure success. And by success, I mean getting the life of that coating. All right, what's the third rule that we can't ignore? This one's pretty easy in my book. Allow the appropriate cure time. So, coatings will typically tell you don't get it wet before X number of days or hours, and don't use chemicals on the surface of the vehicle. Don't wash the vehicle until X days after installation. Follow those. The coating's not going to fall off if you wash your vehicle at 3 days instead of 7 days, but it may affect the longevity of the coating. So it has the appearance of you can do these things and you're still successful. But we're talking about getting the most from the coating over its lifespan. So if it's supposed to be a 5-year coating, what can I do to get as close to that as possible? And one of those things, again, is allowing the proper cure time. And that varies by coating. So it's not just the standard, what I think of a standard, if there was such a thing, would be like, don't get it wet for 24 hours and don't wash it until 7 days after installation, which is fairly common. However, there's other coatings that will say you can get it wet after 6 hours, after 1 hour, after 1 day. And some say you can wash it after 48 hours. In fact, the Naziol coating I put on here said don't get it wet. In fact, don't expose to the environment for 24 hours. And so that means don't get it wet for 24 hours, but it also said don't expose to sunlight and don't wash it for 48 hours. Now, that doesn't mean at 48 hours, run out and wash it. It just means you can. I think allowing the appropriate cure time is essential because this coating is still connecting to the surface in which you applied it. So don't push your luck. If you can avoid putting chemicals on the vehicle for 48 hours, do it. If you can avoid that for 7 days, do it. So follow the coating recommendations for the appropriate cure time. All right, this next rule to follow that you can't ignore is one a portion of society doesn't follow. I think there's two kinds of people in this world. Those that read directions and those that don't read directions. Guess which one I am? Yeah, I am the guy that reads the directions. And it amazes me, and I'm sure the group that doesn't read directions, this is amazing to them as well, or crazy, maybe it's a better word, is why don't you read the directions? Like, if the first time you're doing something, wouldn't you want to read the directions that are provided by the manufacturer? Instead, so many people go rogue. And they either go rogue because they don't want to take the time to read the directions. They've installed different coatings hundreds of times, so they don't need to read the directions of this coating. But I'm telling you that if you read the directions, you will maybe find some facts and information that you didn't know about. And we're usually not talking about a book of rules or directions that you need to follow. It's usually one small page included in the package or a QR code you scan, and you get to a site that's got 10 things you need to know about that coating. Whether it's the conditions to apply it in, whether it's the cure time, whether it's how it will flash, or steps you need to follow, things you need to be aware of about how the coating works and to ensure the greatest chance of success. And so if you're spending all the time and effort to prepare a surface to coat, you're spending money on the coating, labor to do it, why not take, 5 minutes is probably a stretch for most coatings to read the specific directions, scan through those and say, did I learn anything? And if you did, you follow those steps. As I talk with suppliers, and I asked one supplier recently, I'm like, I see a lot of different feedback about your coating. Like there's people that love it and have great success. And there's people that say, oh, it failed after a year. Well, their first things are like, Bruce, they may not have read these directions. They may have leveled it too quickly. They may have not used the correct prep. So they go through these steps that I'm sharing with you, but I was amazed at some of them when they said people just don't read the directions. They aren't spreading the right thickness. They're just wiping it on there and then wiping it right off. Whatever. It's like, really? Because I can't fathom not at least skimming the directions to say, all right, what are the steps I need to follow? It doesn't take long. And look, it may save you problems down the line, especially when you want to get the most from the coating. So just do it simple. Do it for Bruce. Just read the directions. It's okay. It's okay. Well, if you followed all my previous rules that you just can't ignore, there's one last rule. and that is apply the coating only to the surfaces in which it was designed. Again, sounds fairly straightforward, and you may say, well, what do you mean? Well, sometimes people try to apply an exterior coating to an interior surface. Is it designed for that? I had one coating manufacturer recently tell me, do not apply this coating to glass. Most coatings you can apply to glass, but they specifically said in the directions, by the way, do not apply to glass. And I said, well, why not? And it actually can affect visibility. And so it's not just that it's not designed for glass and it may not last as long, but it can affect really safety and performance of that driver in the vehicle, because the coating can affect visibility through the glass. It wasn't designed to be on glass. So I always look through the directions to find out, what surfaces can I coat? Is it just the paint? Or can I coat the trim? So that's important to know, what surfaces can you apply it to, whether that's glass, whether it's trim, just the painted surfaces. So always just look at that information, and if you apply it to a surface it's not designed, again, you may not only lose performance on that surface, but you could affect something else, like safety in terms of the glass, or maybe it discolors another surface. So you want to make sure, again, all the more reasons to read those directions, but only apply the coating for surfaces in which it was designed. Now we have those 5 essential rules that we can't ignore for successful coating installation. Remember, we're going to use the panel prep that's associated with the coating that we're going to use. That's number 1. Number 2, we're going to allow the proper flash time. Keep your eyes on the coating. Understand what it looks like when it's going to flash. Watch the time. Check temperature and humidity in your environment. Remember, as temperature goes up, as humidity goes up, flash time goes down. So you want to make sure you know what it's going to look like when it flashes, and that you're paying attention to that so that you allow the proper time before leveling your coating. Next, just read the directions. Again, this is Naziol's directions. In fact, they have a little pictorial diagram as well. So even if you don't want to read, you can look at the pictures. Really, it's simple. Follow these directions. But as simple as applying a coating is, they are unique. This Naziol coating was a little bit more unique than some of the other coatings I've installed. It goes on a little bit thicker. It flashes much quicker. It gets hard pretty quick. So depending upon the brand of coating, or even which coating within a brand, they're going to perform a little bit differently during installation. When you read the directions, you get that information. You have a better understanding of what to expect. And lastly, apply the coating to surfaces in which it was designed. Don't try to go rogue and apply it to some other surface. Again, it's not only just about performance of the coating, but as I mentioned, if you're applying something to glass that's not designed for glass, that could affect visibility. And in fact, one coating I had said, do not apply to headlights or taillights or glass. Again, it can affect visibility. So we're talking about safety here. And if you just take a minute to read those directions, you'd be amazed at what you'll learn. And you may have been installing that coating for years, and maybe you've been lucky and haven't had any issues. But why not just understand how that coating is going to perform, how you, as the installer, can enable the greatest chance of success. So make sure you follow those 5 rules, don't ignore them, and you'll have much greater success with your coatings. Well, thanks for coming into the garage today. I hope this has been informative. I appreciate your time. If it was helpful for you, I'd love it if you give me a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, I'd love that too, of course. And I really do appreciate you coming into the garage today. Remember, go out in your garage and have some fun. Have a great day.